as always, we want to make sure we have all the right tools installed and whatnot, so make sure you have an account on here. Make sure you have Node.js installed. If you don't, download the LTS. Open up your terminal and make sure you have sudo the turbo CLI installed. So install. Actually, everyone should do this because I did post an update a couple days ago. So you should do this anyway, no matter what. So go ahead and do that. And it's not a huge update, it's just a minor one, but it's worth updating. So we're going to use the CLI to connect to our account on Turbo. Maybe today we can actually deploy, let's see. And today we're going to just create a very, very simple blog. And so you can kind of see how the pieces come together to create a more realistic website, something that's more applicable in the real world. So right now, make sure you check your Turbo version. Make sure you have the same one that I have.
Should I get out of, I'm actually in my blog tutorials, should I just get out of that and just like go into the just regular Tina file?
No, that's fine. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
You should find it. Okay. And then check your Node version. Make sure you have a proper version of Node. And that should be good for today. So we're not going to use much more than that today. Okay, so head over to Turbo 360 and then head to the gallery. And then make sure you click on developers and find the profile we always use by typing this in the search bar and then clicking on this guy right here. And like I said, I'm always going to put our code bases on here, so it'll always be the same one. And today we're going to use this one as our project, our template project for creating a very simple blog. So open that up and download the source. And that will give you a package.zip file, which is the website. So if I actually click on View Demo, by the way, you'll see the website, right? This is the website we're gonna recreate and use for our own blog. Okay. So we're gonna make changes, obviously. We're gonna update it, but this is more about understanding kind of how the project is organized and where the pieces go, where the request response cycle takes place, and how things come together in a slightly more realistic project. So I have the package.zip in the downloads. I'm going to rename this blog. Let's call it blog tutorial, like that. And then I'm putting that on my desktop. And so if I go to my desktop, I should see it right here. And just open that guy up. And I'm going to get rid of this zip file just to make it easier to keep track of stuff. Okay, so just get rid of that. And so this blog tutorial folder is the website, right? So if we open that up in the Finder, we'll see the content of our website, which is a Node Express project, a very, very simple Node Express website. So we're going to go through sort of the pieces of this project tonight and just see how all the pieces come together to show what we see on the actual site, and then hopefully make a few changes and then make it more customized for our own purposes. Okay. So first thing we want to do, as always, is get rid of the node modules, the dependencies. So remember, this is where the dependencies are stored, right? So we want to get rid of that and open up your terminal and cd into the project. So I'm going to my desktop right here. And then I'm going to do /blog intro, or tutorial, excuse me. So I'm now navigating into the project from the terminal. Right? So I'm changing directory into the project, right? And we remove the dependencies, right? The node modules are the dependency. We remove those, right? So we don't want to just keep them gone, right? We want to reinstall them. So who remembers how to do that?
One thing, am I supposed to be getting this error when I do the npm install?
I can't see the. You might not be in the right directory. Yeah, tonight I kind of want to make sure we get through the whole. if you're stuck, like just watch the video again like you did last time, and I'm sure you'll see where it broke down. Okay, so we remove the dependencies. So we don't want to just keep them gone. So what should we do next? Like, how do I reinstall the dependencies?
It just was right there.
Mhm.
Re-add the node modules.
Yeah,
New ones. That's
correct.
what we
Like,
wanna
how do I do that? How do I reinstall the dependencies?
Touch.
Touch is create, right? That's creating a new file. We don't want to create a new file. We want to install the dependencies. So who can remember how to do that?
It would be install.
Not just install though.
I know it's just
The NPM
Yeah,
NPM.
npm install. And this is how you install dependencies. In any node project, that's how you install the dependencies. Okay? So now it's going to run through the dependencies. Where are those dependencies listed? Like, how does npm know what to install? Who remembers? So right now, npm is going through a list of dependencies and installing each one, right? Hey, how's it going? So the question is, how does it know what dependencies to install? Like, there must be a list somewhere, right? So where would that be? Who remembers? So if I take the project and I open it up in my code editor, Visual Studio, I can just do that easily by dragging it over the Visual Studio icon. We're going to see all the files, right? One of these files is where the dependencies are listed.
It should be node module.
That's where they're stored, close.
routes.
But we want to know where the actual dependencies are just physically listed, like the actual list of dependencies. Right, so when we did npm install, it downloaded a bunch of packages. But the question is, like, how does it know what to download? Right, that's an important thing. That's a key concept in Node in general. So how does it know? How does it even know where to find what to download? Every workshop, I'm going to be asking these questions. So go home and review. This is how you learn. So come on, just open up your notes, do it wherever you keep track of the stuff. So that whenever I ask questions like this, I'm pointing it out because these are the important concepts. Right, so this is an important one. So I need you to look it up, figure it out in your notes. No, not the app.js. There's one file in every Node project that is like the table of contents, the most important one.
The package JSON.
Correct. Package.json is where all the dependencies and the scripts, that's where it's all listed. So when you do npm install, like that, when you do that, what's happening next is npm opens up the package.json and it goes to the dependencies entry right there, and it just goes through each one and just downloads each one. That's exactly what just happened. Okay? I'm going to ask it again on Wednesday. So take your notes, look them over before Wednesday, make sure you have it all. I know I said there's no test or anything, but gotta get these important concepts down. This is important, okay? So we just downloaded the dependencies. That means we can now run the project, right? So who remembers how to do that? Or more importantly, if you don't know how to do that, where do you look? Or if you do remember, you can just shout it out. So how do I run the project locally?
NPM.
There you go. So you really did study over the weekend, right? Gotta do it all. That's how you get better. Okay, that's how you get better. If you're only coding here with me, you're not going to get better. You got to go home and do what Talia did. Okay, now we have it running where? On localhost. So just open up your browser and head over to localhost. And now we're looking at the same website on localhost. Make sense? So we are now successfully running the website on our computer as opposed to on the internet. And that's what we're trying to do. So we're good to go. Nicole, I'll give you a couple minutes to catch up. So let me just...
Sure. What was the internet password again?
Yeah, let me just pause the video real quick. Okay, so I'm running the same website on localhost, and make note that this is localhost 3000, and this is the live version on the actual internet. They're identical, right? Or close to it. Let me just make sure. Yeah, close enough. So what we want to do is take this and first of all, we want to explore how it's even organized and understand where the pieces connect. It's a Node Express project. It's organized exactly the same way as what we did over the weekend. There's just more stuff, and then we're going to go through that. And then we want to start actually adding our own stuff. That's basically it. Okay. But it uses all the stuff we already went through last week, like the Mustache templating engine, some jQuery, all that stuff is happening. Request, response, routing, all that's happening. Okay. So I'm going to turn off the server. That's Control-C. We already have the code open, right? So if you look through the code base, you should see that it's more or less the same as what we did last week. It's got the same sort of general file structure, same directory, same file names and whatnot. So everything we studied last week is being used here. There's just more pieces already built in, that's all. So last week what we built was very simple, very primitive. This is just a more pretty version of what we did last week. So we start with the package.json, same as always here. We got our dependencies, we have our scripts, etc., etc. The app.js, same thing, right? This is where the app is sort of configured, right? Who remembers the primary responsibilities of the app.js as we discussed it last week?
Is that when we import and set the route?
The routes, correct. What are the routes? What happens in the routes?
This is where you write the logic.
Correct, right. So the app.js, at least for now, for our initial purposes, is where we import routes and we set the routes. Importing routes, in this particular example, is happening in what line? 21, yeah, that's where we import a route. So apparently we have a route called page, right? And where do we set the route?
24.
24. What do I mean by setting a route? When I say setting the route, what am I literally doing?
Are you just directing it to that's just directing it to the file, right?
That's 21, we're importing the file. And then when we set the route on line 24, what does that actually mean? If you had to explain it to someone who doesn't understand.
That's the path.
The path, right. So what does this mean right here?
That's the home path.
Right. So when I set this route, what I'm saying is on the home page, I want you to use this route to handle the logic. So let's open that guy up. Routes, right? Routes. And then page. And this is the route that's handling the home page in addition to, it looks like a couple other pages, right? So there's a lot more going on here than what we looked at last week, but it's the same concept, okay? I just need you to understand it looks like it is a lot more. And it may look a little overwhelming because it's just a lot more code, right? But we're doing the same thing. We're taking an incoming request, which is right here on line 11, REQ, right? We're using that request to then prepare a corresponding response, and then we're sending back the response data. There's a lot going on here, but from lines 11 to 26, you see that block of code? That's the handler for the home page, right? This is the request handler that's literally handling this page. You guys with me? So there's a lot going on here, but amongst those, I don't know, 15 or so lines, which line of code have we already done? What line of code, what command can you identify in that block of code that we used last week?
Uh, 18.
What's happening on line 18?
The render.
The render command, right?
Yeah,
We used that
render.
last week. Now, can you remember what that does? Like, what is that command doing in this project?
It's taking the user to the actual HTML, the home.mustache page.
Very good. It's taking the home.mustache page, and then what does res stand for? Response. And so what is it doing with the home.mustache?
It's giving back the information that.
Keep it simple.
Okay, I know.
We just said it. Res stands for.
The response.
So what is that doing with the home page? Yeah, we're responding with the home page. So that home mustache file is the response we're sending back on the home page. In other words, that's literally this guy right here. Where are the contents of this HTML coming from?
From the home dot, or from the render page of the home dot mustache.
Yeah, literally if I had to find the exact file where this HTML exists, where would it be? Home.mustache, very good. And that's how you break down a project. You see how we're piecing together where to find stuff? So now, let me just finish real quick and then I'll answer you. So that's going to be in which directory?
That would be in the views.
Correct. And then there's going to be a home.mustache. And if I open that up, this HTML right here represents what we see over here.
Okay.
And like that's how you piece it together. Okay, so now what's your question?
That's pretty much what I was going to ask you. It's just so I'm understanding it correctly. So that RES, that is the response
Yes.
of this page, the home.mustache page, or what you just showed us a moment ago.
That's what we use to send this page back to the user.
Okay.
Okay, the response object is the object that we use right here to, in this case, render the home page.
Okay.
Now, if let's say don't copy this, just watch me do it. If I do res.send, and then this is the home page, right? And then I get rid of this. What's going to happen when I reload the site?
This is the home page.
Right, because we just removed the render command. We just got rid of it, and we just injected our own string. There's one of our people is here. Can you let her in? I'm just going to pause the video real quick. So now that we've taken out the home render and we've replaced it with some dummy text, right? If I rerun the server, and again, don't do this, just watch because it's just for demonstration. We just wiped out the entire homepage. And this is also a good way to confirm that you do, in fact, understand what's going on. I do this all the time. Like, well, what if I just take this out and replace it with something really simple? Like, will I see what I expect to see? And if I don't, that means I don't understand what's going on. I have more digging to do, which happens all the time. All the time that happens. Like, okay, I must have misunderstood something. Maybe I didn't run a certain build script. Maybe it's not running on localhost. It happens all the time. Okay? So I'm going to turn off the server now and restore the home page. Now let's open up the actual home.mustache. Let me just make sure I didn't forget to record. Okay. And there's more stuff going on here that we actually didn't deeply explore last week, which is worth covering because it's not really that complicated. If you look at line 6, you'll see a different notation. You see like double curly braces, which is the syntax notation for what? The templating engine. Who remembers what it's called?
The mustache.
Mustache, right? Which is also the same syntax for what's called handlebars. Same thing. They're basically the same templating engine with a few minor variations. But you'll see that this little caret here, that little caret sign, I'm going to make the text a little bit bigger because I think it's still a little hard to see. That represents something else. This represents something called a partial. A partial is simply a chunk of HTML that you can input with that caret. So you see on line 6, it's it's one line, right? But it's really like maybe 10 or 15 lines. Because if you look at the partials directory, you'll see a file inside called head.mustache. So what's going on is this right here is being replaced with these contents, these 8 lines. And that's how partials work. So you can just replace entire chunks of HTML using a partial. Okay, that's a pretty important concept because it comes up everywhere. So whenever you see this little, I guess like greater than sign or less than sign, we're injecting a chunk of HTML. So you can see we're doing it again here on line 13. You see that? So what that means is if I look in the partials directory, there should be a file called what? .mustache, which is right here. And this is a huge chunk of text. It's 56 lines of HTML. Make sense? So you may be wondering, like, well, why don't we just put in that HTML instead? Like, why are we using the shortcuts, right? Which is a fair question. Because oftentimes or almost every single website, you'll have multiple pages that you reuse the same HTML. So instead of actually copying and pasting the same HTML over and over and over again, you can just use the partial. And it makes it much easier to read. Okay, and that's like the right way to use partials. Okay, so if you look at my own website, for example, you'll see on top, you see that little bar on top with the menu bar, right? That looks one way. If I click on another page, the menu bar is, well, it's almost identical. So what do you think I'm doing here? I'm using a partial. A better example would be the footer, because this is literally the same. So here on the bottom is my footer, right? On the gallery page. And then if I go to the bottom here, it's the same exact footer. It's the same chunk of HTML. So it would be really sloppy if I just copied and pasted the same HTML over and over again. Because if I make a change on one page, I got to make the same change on like 15 pages. That's like really inefficient. So the partials takes care of that for us. You guys with me? So that's how partials works. And then, do I have the server running? Yes, I do. Okay. So we have our partials here, and that's how you use partials using the Mustache templating engine. You may recall, actually maybe 24 is a bit too big. I'm going to make that down to 20 again. From last week, you may recall that we used this hashtag right here on line 18. You see that? With the templating engine. We only used it once, so I don't blame you for forget, but does anyone actually remember what that means? So when you see a hashtag like that inside of the Mustache templating engine as well as handlebars, what that means is we're looping through a list of items. So right here in this chunk of code right here, right, you see lines 18 through 34. There's one like chunk of code, right? But we're looping through it, and the loop is called posts. So given the context of this website, what do you think that represents? Or what do you, actually a better way to phrase that question is, what do you think we're looking at when I, here it is. So here's the home.mustache, right? Mm-hmm. Where it says hashtag posts, what do you think we're looking at?
Different posts.
Yeah, all 3 of these. 1, 2, 3. There's an array of 3 posts, blog posts, right? That we are currently looping through on lines 18 through 34. So rather than like write it out 3 times, we just write it out once. And then the loop renders it 3 times. Or 5 times, or 20 times, depending on how many blog posts there are. Right? That way we don't have to like know beforehand, like, oh, I have 5 blog posts, so I gotta copy and paste this 5 times. That would be very inefficient, because maybe you have 6 blog posts, or maybe you have 2. Right? So that wouldn't be a good way to maintain your site.
So you don't have to put a number there.
Correct. It could be 1,000, or it could be none, whatever, right? And that's what this hashtag right here indicates, that we're looping through an array of posts. Okay? Now this data, this post data at all comes from a data object that's being injected into the template. Don't forget what templating engines are for. Why do we even use a templating engine? So that we can inject data into an HTML template, right? And so somewhere in that data is going to be a posts key or post object, which this templating engine is looping through. Now, because we're looping through it, that posts data key has to be a certain type of data. Who remember? It's got to be like a list of items. Who remembers what that's called? In programming, a list of items has a special word, an array. Correct. So there's an array of posts that's in the data. And these are all the sort of the logical connections you need to sort of put together, like just by looking at a project, rather than like coding furiously. I spend, I would say, 70% of my time, maybe 2/3 of my time, just like looking and interpreting code before I start writing stuff. Because what I'm doing is I'm making sure I understand what the heck is going on. Right? I need to make sure I have a good sense of like, okay, this is what he's doing here, this is what he's doing there. And then I start, once I get a good like mental picture of what's happening, then I start making changes. Right? So what do we know for certain based on here? First of all, there has to be a data object injected somewhere. And inside that data object, there has to be a posts value, which has to be an array. All that has to be true. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be seeing what we're seeing, right? So if I go back to the route, here on line 17, what's happening? We're taking the data object. Actually, you probably haven't seen this notation yet. And we're creating a key called posts, and we're assigning it a posts array. And this data object is being injected into the template. Okay, now I don't expect you to understand this right away. Again, this is one of those deals where we're going to do it again and again and again, and then as we go deeper and deeper and do it again, you'll understand it like maybe the third, fourth, or fifth time. Okay, but for certain, that has to take place. Now, if I remove this, or if I comment that out, right, and then I go back here, well, I should run the server, and I run the server, and then I go back to the site and I reload localhost, what should happen? No post. What should we see? Nothing except the header. We didn't remove the header, right? So if now this is localhost over here. So if I reload, that's it, right? So you see how this is how we kind of confirm, like, okay, this is doing that, that's doing that, and this is how you sort of mentally check yourself, like, am I going crazy? Like, is this really is what I'm saying accurate? Like, that's how you tell, right? So now if I go back here and I restore the posts key, right, and then I reload, what should happen? Back in business, right? And so how many posts do we definitely have here? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 posts, blog posts, right? Okay, so far so good. And so now we have like these two pieces very well understood, right? Line 17 and 18, we just explored it, we understand it, and we're good on that, right? Now the question is like, where are these posts even coming from? Like, where are these posts, right? So if we're assigning the posts on line 17, like if that's where the posts are being passed off to the data, which is clearly what's happening, right? Then what do you suppose line 15 is doing? And I don't expect you, we didn't discuss this yet, so I'm asking you to guess here. Like, what does your intuition tell you is happening on line 15?
It looks like it's receiving a method from the
Mm-hmm. So what do you think it's doing? Getting what?
It's getting the post from.
Exactly. Getting the post from something.
From somewhere.
But let's not worry about that yet.
Okay.
But you can clearly see it's getting something. what do you think it's getting? You just said it. The
post.
posts, right. So that's where we're getting the posts, or in programming terminology, it's more like fetching the posts. So right here is where we fetch the blog post in this case. Okay, and then when we fetch the blog posts, then we pass it off to the data. You see how you read that? Okay. And here on line 16, right there, what I've highlighted, those are the posts that we have fetched. Okay. Now I want to be clear. For a group of beginners, I'm like going way fast. So like we're already entering like more intermediate concepts. So I'm just explaining to you what's happening. Okay. And then we're going to do it again, and then again, and then again. We're using a paradigm here called promises, asynchronous promises. They normally don't get to this encoding boot camps until about week 8 or so. So I'm just sort of, but what they do typically in a more traditional structure is they go through the bottom up, like this is a variable, this is a function, this is an array, and that's fine. But like I said, I'm not approaching it that way. I'm taking a different approach, which is we're going to just go through a bunch of projects and I'm just going to explain it again, and then again, and then again, and then eventually you'll start to. It's kind of like learning French just by forcing you to speak French. You just go to France and you have no choice. You're going to have to learn because no one's going to help you out with your, translating to English, especially in France. So they're going to be like, we don't care if you don't speak French. This is the language we speak. So think of it that way. And that's how kids learn languages, right? That's how they learn languages. So okay. So we're fetching the posts. Now the question becomes like, where do these posts actually come from? So in this particular project, we're running what's called a local database. Okay, a local database as opposed to a real database like a SQL server. We're not doing any of that. We're running a local database, which very, very closely resembles what's called the Mongo database. Mongo is a very popular database, especially in the startup world. Mongo is very dominant. The other ones are MySQL, MySQL, Postgres. Like these are common databases. So what this project runs off of as a data store is a local database which very closely mimics the Mongo database interfaces, the Mongo APIs. Okay. So you could actually use that to like learn how Mongo works, and that would be fine. Like you would be learning Mongo APIs. So that local database in this particular project is stored in the TMP folder, stands for temporary, TMP. And inside here, you're going to see a DB file, database file, called posts, right? So if I double click on that, how many posts do you see? 4. Just like we see over here, 4, right? So and these are, by the way, these are JSON objects. Okay, just like I said last week, JSON is like the primary means of organizing data. And JSON, again, JSON, just key value pairs, right? So if I scroll to the right, you see there's a title, right? Title, category, the actual text. It's a lot of stuff. But it's just key value pairs, right? And these are all just JSON objects. By the way, the reason these are JSON objects is because in a Mongo database, that's how data is stored. In a Mongo database, data is stored as raw JSON objects. And so this really is like Mongo in that regard. Okay? So I'm going to turn off the server real quick. So we have 4 blog posts. That's why we see 4 things here, right? If I highlight the last 2 and I just remove them and I save the file, what's going to happen? Right, we lose the second 2 and we get the first 2. So if I rerun the server, now we're down to just 2. So now we see where the data actually comes from. Okay. I'm going to turn the server off and restore those two. Actually, it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to take one of these. So I highlighted just one. These are rather big JSON objects, so I just highlighted one. You see that? I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to open up a new browser and JSON formatter. Okay, so I Googled JSON formatter. All of you can actually do this with me because we're not going to actually code this part. So but you can just do this part with me. And just Google JSON formatter, and then click on the first result. This is a nice little tool that I use a lot. And I just paste in the JSON I copied. And then click the button, process. And then you see on the bottom, you'll see the JSON like formatted. You see that? So we have title, things your favorite clothing store doesn't tell you, right? We have a category, we have the actual text HTML. We've got the date, just whatever stuff. We have a whole bunch of stuff, key value pairs. The most important thing for now is the title, things your favorite clothing store doesn't tell you. If you go back to the actual site that we're running, let me just reload the server real quick. You'll see it down here. You see that? Okay. And you'll see all the other what's called metadata. This is called metadata. Like you see the tag is fashion, the date is July 19th, the title. Metadata is just fancy talk for details. These are the details. Okay. So like your metadata is Tina is your first name, Twan is your last name. That's your metadata, right? So you'll see the same data here, just rendered rather than here. You see where it says image right there? If I highlight that entire thing and I copy it, just copy it and paste it into the browser, you'll see the image of that blog post. And that's how the data is stored. Okay? So this is very conventional. This is like a very typical way data is stored in a simple project like a blog website. I guarantee like WordPress posts are organized in a similar fashion. And
It's almost the exact same.
yeah. So you want to get used to this sort of structure. Like this is how data is passed around. This is how it's done. Right? You guys with me so far? Okay. So if we go back to the page route. So now we know what's going on here. We're fetching the blog post. Now this controller concept is going to be a bit too much for now to actually dive through the code. But what's important to understand here is that the controller in this context, in this project, is the tool that we use to literally communicate with the database. Okay? So, you need a means of communicating with the database. And in this case, that's done through the controllers. Although this does bring up a good conceptual paradigm called Model View Controller. MVC, Model View Controller, is a programming paradigm in which we try as best we can to separate the logic of the data, what's called the model, which is the data. We try to keep that separate from the logic of the views as much as we can. And the actual interplay between the two should happen within the controllers. The controllers is like a traffic manager between the model and the views. Now, if the view logic, or the templates in our case, has a lot of references to the model, which it kind of does here, that's not tragically bad. There's some wiggle room here. Some purists would disagree. But what's certainly bad is if the model has references to the view. That's no bueno. That should never happen. So what do I even mean by the model? So if I go to the models folder, you'll see there's one model called post. That's your blog post. Okay, if I open that up, you'll see all the attributes. These shouldn't be commented at. This is sloppy. I should just remove these altogether. Okay, so we have the image, the title, etc., category, date, string, whatever. All the stuff you saw over here in the JSON, right? It's all the same key values, right? That's where they come from. Now, what's important to understand is in here, there should be no reference to anything view related, like HTML or using this template. So for example, like somebody who doesn't understand this concept would do something like this. Template type string, and then default home.mustache. You see what I'm doing there? I'm referencing a view concept in the model. That's no good. So that's what I meant by, like, if you go into the views and reference some model objects, some model attributes, it's not ideal, but it won't kill you either. That is never gonna go. That'll never fly. Okay, the other way will never fly. So that's the core principle of MVC. Okay. So we definitely want to not have that. Okay. So I'm just sort of rifling through some important concepts here. This is more about understanding how projects are organized rather than like actually doing the coding. But let's actually, while we're here, let's actually do some coding. So that's a quick overview of kind of like how the data is rendered and whatnot. Actually, let's do one more real quick. If I click on the first one, right, work at a modern office, then I go to the actual blog post itself, right? And then I read it and whatever, right? And that's how blogs are organized, right? So let's break down how this is happening, okay? First of all, we're on a whole new page of the same website, right? This is the home page right here, localhost 3000. Now if I click on this, we're now looking at another page, right? And the address is different, right? Look at the actual address. It's localhost 3000 and then a bunch of stuff afterwards. Who remembers what the stuff afterwards is called? Say it louder, Tina. Path. Don't be afraid to be wrong. Right? No one's criticizing you. If you're wrong, I just tell you you're wrong. And then we get it right. That's it. Okay? It's the path, right? Now, the path, who can recall like what the path is for? Like what is it dictating?
Multiple way paths to the site.
I'm not sure I understand. What do we use the path for? Try as best you can to explain it in like the simplest terminology as possible, like something a kid would understand.
So multiple paths to get to this page, to what I'm looking at, to localhost 3000.
Right, so this is another path, which is obviously rendering in a different content.
The folder?
Not in this case, no. So we use the path to determine which route is handling the logic. This is very important, so write this down. We're using the path to determine which route is handling the logic. So we have to write, or we don't have to because it's already written. What this guarantees is that there is at least another route handler, at least one more. Otherwise, we wouldn't be seeing this. This would be physically impossible, right? So there has to be at least one more route that we use to show an individual blog post. And the path, we're looking right at it, right? Post, work at a modern office, right? So there's got to be another one called slash what? Slash posting, very good. Slash
work at a modern.
Correct. Now the problem, though, I don't know if you can anticipate the problem here. They're like this right here. Excuse me. Those words are unique to that blog post. right? So we can't write an individual path for every single blog post. That's impossible, right? Like you might have thousands, right? So we have to find a way to dynamically create a path. And that's what we're going to do next. Or it's done because we're looking at it, but that's what I'm going to show you next. So if I go back to the page route, this path right here on line 11 is for what page? The home page. So we're not looking at this one anymore. This is no longer the one we want, right? So that means let's scroll down a bit. Apparently we have another one called posts, right? But that's not the one we were looking at either, right? Because Kia, what was the path that we were just looking at?
The path that we were just looking at.
Slash post, right? Slash something else. So this guy looks like that might be our path, our suspect, right? So here we have slash post, just like you said, and then notice this colon right here, slug.
Yeah,
That colon, the colon, forget the word, don't worry about that, just the colon right here means whatever comes after this slash can be anything. It can be whatever the user enters, that's what it is. It's a placeholder, it's basically a variable. It's called a parameter, a request parameter.
So I could do like colon darling and it wouldn't matter.
No, almost. You could do colon, you could do colon, some people doesn't like to add whatever, or you can do slash collection, like whatever comes afterward doesn't have to be a specific word.
Okay.
But right here, this has to be specifically the word post. Otherwise, this route handler isn't doing the logic. Unfortunately, we have some indenting inconsistencies here, so let me just fix this real quick. Okay, that's how it should be. Now, let's break this one down. So here, this right here is a request parameter. What that means is inside this request object right here exists a parameter, in this case called slug. So right here, after the data object, I'm going to pull out the slug. And this part I actually do want you to do with me. So we're going to grab the slug. It's a request parameter. So we do req request, and then params, and then slug. And this variable on line 47, the value we extracted from that, comes from this path pattern. That's where we get it from. We know it has to be there because the path dictates it. Like that has to exist. Otherwise, like it would be paradoxical. Like how could the path even exist? So far, so good. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to do a console log. Okay, I'm going to console log the slug on these requests. And that's literally console.log. And then I'm going to say slug equals, and then the slug value. Tali, can you grab me one of those markers? Just doesn't matter which one. Thanks. Thank you. Okay, so here on the console log on line 48, it'll like spit out the text of whatever the slug value is. So if I open the terminal, this is where the console is, okay? The server console. We are now doing back-end programming. I want to be very clear. This is the back-end now, okay? So I'm going to clear the console. I'm going to go back here. I'm currently on one of the blog posts. I'm going to reload the page, and it's the same thing, right? But look at what we get here. See that? Do you see it all the way on top? we extracted the slug value from the request parameters, and we just console logged it. Okay, does that make sense? Am I going too fast? Seeing a lot of not so sure what's going on faces.
Can you say it one more time?
Yeah, so right here, the important stuff is on lines 45. On line 45, we have a colon right here, and then a word that comes after it. What that colon represents is that the value here can be anything.
As long as it's related to the post.
No, it could be just anything.
It could just be.
Yeah, but we're calling it, but we're giving it a variable name, in this case, slug. Okay? This value here, post, cannot be anything. It must be literally the word post. No choice on that. And using this colon means we are using what's called a request parameter. Okay, it's a very important concept. Okay? And in this case, we are calling that parameter slug. That's our choice. And slug is a word that relates to blog posts. Blog posts should have a slug. It's basically a unique identifier. Okay? So on line 47, we are grabbing the slug value. And notice how it says rec, because it's from the request, dot params, because it's a parameter. And then the actual value of the name of the variable, which we determined to be slug. Okay? And then for now, we're just console logging it, and that's it. And that's what's happening right there.
Why are we console logging?
Just so you can like visually confirm. So you can see visually like, oh, this is in fact working. Because if you look at this word, this text right here,
Oh.
you see that? Collection of cozy rooms, interior, whatever.
Oh.
You see that? That matches what we see here. That's the slug value. Now watch what if I do this. Does this work? Right? I'm going to get like a nonsense output here because there is no blog post with that name. Right? But look at what happens here.
Oh.
So the slug value is there. Like no matter what I put in here, that's the slug value. And that'll show up over here. And that's determined by using this colon. That one little colon makes all that happen. You guys with me?
So is that one little colon, is that just for sections 45 through 48? Or is that for?
Almost 45 through the end of this block. So right there, 67.
Okay, so, okay.
Mm-hmm. That's called the scope. It's only works within that scope. Okay, that's a good question. And then this is a node express concept. This is an important concept within node express. Okay, so this is an important one. So write this one down. Get to ask about it again, probably on Wednesday. Okay, so as we do more and more of these workshops, I'm going to just sprinkle in a little bit more stuff and try and probably rehash about at least half of what we did last time. Okay. So let's discuss briefly, like what are we even doing with that? Why do we have that? So a slug value is like a unique identifier of a blog post. Every blog post should have a slug value. If you actually look at an example like,
That's just by convention?
yeah, it's an industry norm. That's a good question. So like, I read the New York Post a lot. So let's say I go here. Look at this. You guys see that? That's the slug. Okay. So that's pretty normal for blog posts, or in this case, newspaper posts. Okay? So that's what that is. Its purpose is to have a unique identifier for a blog post. That's its purpose. One could argue, like, why don't we just use the actual database ID? You could. It's just very poor form. You don't want to use the database identifier. That's like your social security. Right? Like, you don't want to do that. Theoretically, I could identify people by their social security, or you could just be like, hey, I'm Danny, here's my social security. You don't want to do that. Probably something better would be your phone number or your email, but that's fine, right? But your phone number is a de facto unique identifier, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's impossible. I think it would be impossible for two people to have the same phone number, right? So that's the slug. Why are we grabbing it like this? Because if you think about the purpose of this page, this particular page, its purpose is to read a single blog post, a specific blog post, right? So we need a way to identify that blog post. Like, which one do you want to read, right? Again, we could just plug in the actual database ID. We could do that, but that would be very poor form, right? You're exposing the database ID. It's very insecure. So instead, what we do is we use the slug value to uniquely identify a blog post and then grab it from the database, right? Now remember what I said a few minutes ago about how our tool for communicating with the database is the controller, which is pretty typical. So in other words, we're going to grab our controller, we're going to take our controller and ask it to fetch not all the blog posts this time, right? We want to fetch a specific blog post. And how do we know which one? By using the slug, right? So that's what's going on line 51. On line 50, we're just grabbing the controller. That's all that's really happening there. We're grabbing the controller. And then on line 51, we're getting a blog post again, but this time we're getting a specific blog post, not all of them. And you can see inside here, how that's being determined. We want the blog post with the following slug value, which is this right here. And really, I could just replace it like that. This is confusing because it's the same word twice, and it'll fetch the blog post with that slug value. Does that make sense? And that's so again, the key takeaway there is that the controller is your interface with the database. You use the controller to communicate with the database. Right, so we're going to have to explore a controller soon, probably in about 2 weeks, and how to actually use it to interface with the database. In other words, if I want to create a new blog post, that's going to be done through the controller. If I want to delete a blog post, the controller will do that. It must have some sort of functionality whereby we can do that. Okay? Right now, we're just fetching blog posts. But even fetching has multiple dynamics. Do we want to fetch all of them, one of them, a specific one, etc. Okay? So, when we fetch the blog post, right, then it runs this code, assuming we find it. Okay? Lines 53 through 56 assumes we didn't find it, so just ignore that for now. Lines 58 and 59 are where the successful logic is happening. Right, so on line 58 and 59, and again, I don't expect you to know the answer, I just want you to kind of try to intuit your way through this. What do you suppose is happening? What do you deduce is happening on lines 58 and 59? Or at the very least, I should say on line 59, you should be able to piece together what's happening on line 59. So we'll start with that. What's happening on line 59? 59.
So RES is response.
Correct.
So it would be the response of the post or the post. It's rendering the information.
Be more specific. It is rendering something because it literally says the word render, right? Tell me what it's rendering.
The post. It's putting out the post, so it's what's going to actually show on the box.
So how do we know what it shows?
From the front handle, the RES render, and then the post in the quotations.
This is called an argument. So here we're calling a function, right? Because every time you see the curly braces, the parentheses, that means we're calling a function. Functions take arguments. So whatever we put inside the parentheses are called arguments. So let's work on using the proper terminology. And I'm guilty of this all the time. I throw around slang. I'll work on that. So we're calling the render function, which takes these two arguments. Now, who can remember what the first argument always represents in the render function? Is always the what?
I was thinking it was always the home path and the render
Mm-mm.
function. Oh.
Nope. So clear your head. Lot of confusion right now, right? There's lot too much going on upstairs, right? Take it a step back. What does the render function do? Like how does it know what to render? Yeah, use your notes if you have to.
So the first one's the path and the second's the logic.
Not the path. Nope. Render doesn't work with path. Which means, what is the first one? If it's not the path, it has to be something else. Now remember, the render function always renders a template. Always. That's how it works.
So it's always gonna be something from like a view?
Correct. Now in this case, which view?
So I guess, but there's not a, oh, there is a post view. Okay, so the post that must have.
Good. That's those are the mental connections you got to make
So you said the render function always renders
of template.
a template.
Yeah, sometimes called a view. That's fine. Okay. So again, these are the processes you have to like go through and force yourself to do when looking at a new project, right? So this render command right here absolutely guarantees what? Inside the views directory, there has to be what?
Post out.
Correct. That has to be happening. Okay. So this has to exist.
So when I'm, okay, all right, just so I can make sure I'm understanding this. So if I'm looking at line 59, I should say, okay, Tina, there should be in the views a post.mustache file for me to
You got it.
view.
You got
Okay,
it.
all right.
And that's kind of what I'm trying to like inculcate. Like this is the thought process I'm trying to sort of convey. And we're going to do it again and again. So, but that's correct. Nicole?
Is views, is that in the partial folder?
No.
It's in the full folder.
Yep, right here.
So, but for each page, you have to have a view folder, or view file.
For
that
each?
mustache.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Because what you're looking at, I'm sorry, right here, what you're looking at here is a template.
Right. So this is the home. and so
Correct.
it's the
Home.mustache. You got it.
And then this one doesn't have all of them. Then there's an about and a posts.
And what am I looking at now?
So now you're looking at the posts
Dot,
mustache.
not posts,
Or
not
post.
post.mustache, right.
But so, and that has to correlate to the first part of the, what's after the, I can't think of the word, where it says post, like /post.
Mhm.
Is that a coincidence, or does it have to do that?
No, it's not a coincidence. So what this is doing right here
Mhm.
on line 45
Mhm.
is this is dictating that this will even happen.
Right.
So this is a path right here, right? And remember what paths do. A path determines what logic is going to take over. So by defining this path right here, we are dictating the logic, which results in this page right here.
But you could name them something different.
Yeah, in fact, let's do that right now. So I'm going to run the local server again. Right, so I'm running the local server. And then let's open up localhost again. And we have our blog post, right? And the path we're looking at is this one right here, right? And this is the one we're exploring right now, right? And like you said, it's post and then whatever variable we want after it. But you asked a good question, like what if we decide to call it something else, right? Like what if I say, instead of post, I want to call it article, right? I just changed the path. The logic we had before no longer, it's just not there anymore. So if I go back here and I reload, what's going to happen? Who can tell me?
It's gonna say, post/article.
No, it should just change to article, right?
No, if I literally reload, if I press this button right here,
It should just be localhost 3000 article.
because then I'd have to type that in, right? So if I reload, I'm reloading a path that no longer exists.
Wait, go back.
Yeah.
So I changed that to article, right? It used to be
because
post,
you're getting it.
and it used to be post. That's now gone, and I replaced it with article.
So it's not gonna be a post, it's not gonna be anything.
Right.
'Cause
It's
you
gonna
can-
fail. You got it.
It doesn't have post in front.
We no longer define that path.
Okay.
So if I reload, God willing, I did my job right, this should actually fail. So it should say something like, well, can't do it. Because we just removed it. Right? But if I want to see it work, what do I need to do?
Put post.
I can put it back, but then I'm just going in circles, right? But if I want to see it work in the URL,
Remove article.
now we're back in business.
Okay,
Now everyone else do the same. Everyone else do exactly what I just did.
but you didn't take article out of.
No, that's because we redefined it as article.
Oh.
Okay, so everyone do that right now. I want everyone to do exactly what I just did. I want to pause it. Okay, so I changed the path to article, but I'm going to change it back to post because of the issue that Nicole raised, where you have a home page where all the links assume the path is post / and then the slug. Those links are broken if we change it to article, right? So we want to change it back to post and basically just bring it back to the way it was originally. Right, so let me make sure I have the server running. Do. So now if I reload this, it's going to break because it still says article, right? So if I reload that, that doesn't work anymore. And then I go back to post and back to where we were before. Okay? So now let's step through this again. Back here. So on line 51, the controller is fetching a single blog post, or at least trying to, with a specific slug value. And so again, think of it like a phone number. Like when I call your phone, like the Verizon cell tower or whatever knows, like it takes that number and it looks for your phone, right? It doesn't call like 1,000 phones until you answer. Like it just knows it's your phone. That's similarly what's going on here. Okay. Gonna ignore the error message for now. We'll get back to it in a few minutes. Going back to what I was saying earlier, on line 59, we've determined that the render, it renders a template called post, and it has to be post.mustache because that's the templating engine. And that's how we've pieced that together, right? On line 58, can you guess what's happening here? And again, this is another one of those, like I don't expect you to know, I want you to try and guess. One thing that's pretty evident, just like on the home route, is we're manipulating the data object, right? We can see that just happening, right? We're manipulating the data object. What are we doing with the data object? We're adding a value called post, or a key, and we're grabbing the first post from the results of the search, of the fetch. So it's a little confusing. So let's break it down again. When the controller fetches blog posts, it's supposed to return one, but the controller doesn't know that. It's just going to return a list. It's basically saying, here are all the blog posts with this slug. It's the same idea with the phone number. Like if I call a phone, really what's happening is here are all the phones with this number. But how many is that? One, right? The same thing is going on here. Here are all the blog posts with this slug. However, it doesn't have to be one. It could also be 0. Just like I can enter a phone number that doesn't exist. That could happen.
No.
Right? So like here are all the phones with this number, and the number might be just total gibberish, right? And that's giving me a result set of 0. But here, if I have a result set of 1, I can just grab the first one, and that's the blog post I want.
Because it's no number set.
It's just, there's only one anyway. Just grab the first one. I'm just taking the first one out of the list. That's what's going on there. That's not terribly important. That's just what's happening.
Okay.
Okay? What matters is what's going on here. We're taking that post and we're putting it into the data. That's what matters. So another way this could be written, and some people would actually prefer it this way because it might be more sensible, is I can do it like this. This is what's called more readable. On line 58, I'm just taking the first one as the post that we want, and I'm passing it off on line 59 to the data. So it's kind of like here, you asked for this. This is what you wanted. Here's the post that you asked for. And on line 60, this is the most important thing. The data is being injected into the template. Remember, that's what templating engines do. So now the template post.mustache has access to what?
The data.
The data, which contains what? The post. Very good. So if I open up the post.mustache template, I should see a bunch of references to what?
The
Post. Right. And the post has certain attributes, metadata. Just off the top of your head, who remembers any of them?
The
Title. Give me a couple more. Sorry?
Picture, the picture.
Yeah, image, title, date, what's called the date string. Yeah, and then the actual post, which is called text. So if I open up the post.mustache, post.title, you see that? Post.text, it's referencing the metadata of the post. There's the category, don't forget that. Can't remember where the image is. Oh yeah, post.image. You see all the metadata being referenced from the data, the post data object. That's only possible because of this line right here. So this template, I'm just going to get rid of this stuff to make it easier to read. This template right here is referencing the data that's being passed right here in these like various, post.image, post.title, post.date, etc., etc. The metadata. You guys see that?
So the post.mustache is strictly about the post and the data
In
the
this
post.
case, correct. So when I reload this, I didn't make any changes, right? So it's all the same. But let's say I go back here and just don't even do this. I just ignore it. Right? I didn't pass off the post data, right? So when I reload, what do you think is going to happen?
It's not going to have any data. The picture will be there, the header. But
The header will be there.
information about
It
the
won't
stuff
have
the
any
writing
information,
is not going to be
content.
Right. All the content of the actual post itself will no longer show up. It's just going to show a bunch of weird stuff. Because what did I do? I swiped out the data. The key, like the most important piece of the information, I just removed. You guys with me?
Yeah.
So obviously we don't want to do that. We want to put that back. Now, this template right here, like I was saying earlier, it's making references to some model attributes. So this would be considered a minor violation of MVC, Model View Controller. But most people would be like, that's not a big deal, it's fine. It's the other way that's a real sin. You don't want to put any view logic in the actual model. That's the one that's most important. Okay. So here, don't forget these double curly braces are the mustache templating engine like syntax, right? So everywhere you see that is where the templating engine is doing its thing. That's where it's doing its job. That's also triple curly brace, but right now the distinction isn't very important. They're basically the same for now. Okay. You could also do this on sort of a more bit-by-bit basis. Like, so for example, instead of post.title, I can just remove this and say hello, right? And then everything else will show up, but the title will no longer show up. It'll just say hello. You guys see that? And like, that's how the pieces come together. That's how this whole thing is being organized. So far, so good. Okay. So one thing I want to try, just to see if we can make this a little bit more interactive, because right now it's just been me explaining stuff to you. Go back to, anyone have any questions? No? Go back to your account on Turbo. Click on your account page. And on the left-hand side, you should see an option called Downloaded. And these are all the projects you've downloaded so far. Okay? And it should be basically everything we've done so far last week. Right? And one of them should be blog tutorial. Is that what I called it? Blog tutorial? It doesn't show up on mine because it's my project, so you won't see it on mine.
You said click on that. See,
Download it.
blog, so yes,
Yeah, one of them should say blog tutorial, the one we use tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Click on clone environment and just enter whatever name you want to give your site. Basically, you're naming the site right now. So just say like my blog or, test blog, whatever. And then just run that through, and it should take like a minute or so. And when that's done, you should see something that looks like this.
So put in our name and then click on clone environment.
Yeah, or whatever name you want for this
Yeah,
project.
so I can put our name and then clone
Yeah.
environment. Okay.
And it'll take a few seconds or a minute, and then when it's done, you'll see something that looks like this. Okay, tell me if and when you see this.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So what you've done so far is you've created an environment, a server environment for your project. So now you claim some space on the server, kinda, so that you can publish your project. You can post it. You can literally put it on the internet, which is what we're gonna try next. Okay. So what you want to do next is go to your terminal and turn off the server if you have it running. And make sure you are in the blog tutorial root directory. The home directory, sometimes called the root directory, whatever. So far, so good. Okay. Now, this is an account activity, which means you have to log in. Like, not anyone can do this. Only you can do this on your account, right? So you do turbo login, and then you log in. Which account did I use for this? Okay, and then it'll say it'll tell you if you successfully logged in. Okay, did you guys log in?
I'm having a problem with my password.
Okay.
I can't remember what password is for mine.
It'll tell you if it worked. It'll
Yeah,
say,
it said logged in.
okay, yeah.
It's me.
Yeah.
And then,
I mean,
oh, okay.
you got it. Yeah.
All right.
So you're logged in. Great.
Mm-hmm.
So now it knows it's you, right? That's the idea here. That way it can't, like, we don't want it to be such that, like, I can deploy websites to your account. And that's what we're preventing right now, and vice versa, okay? So now what we want to do is go back to our admin console. Or actually, no, I skipped a step. We want to do turbo connect. And this command here will connect our project locally to our environment on the server. The environment you just created when you did clone environment. Okay? It's going to ask you for a site ID. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
So you go back to the admin dashboard and you see the site ID right here. You just copy that. That's your site ID. So your site has a unique identifier. That's it. Okay? And you paste that in, press enter. It's going to ask for your API key. You go back and you find your API key. It's right here. And then you paste that, press enter, and then you've connected your local project to your server environment on Turbo. That's what that accomplishes, which means you can now publish your project. You can put it on the internet so that everyone can see it. So who's with me so far? Is everyone with me?
I think I downloaded the wrong tutorial site.
Okay. Well, I'm recording all this, and just do it again when you get home.
How do I get this?
So who got that far?
I don't remember my password.
Okay. So no one? I was really hoping we can publish tonight. Let me-
Which one is this? It's giving me my hosting right
Yeah, so once you've connected the site ID and the API key, the last thing you need to do is turbo deploy. And that will send your project, your local project, to your environment that you cloned about 10 minutes ago. It usually takes a couple minutes. You're just uploading a bunch of files. And then that will be your website. Like, that's literally a real website.
Oh, wow.
And like, you can,
So I can tell someone, hey, go to my website, Tina's blog.
Yeah.
blah.
right.
Oh,
And so on
okay.
Wednesday, we're going to, like, take those contents and, like, make it
Make it
literally
personal.
your,
Okay.
like, we're going to get rid of the image on top, and we're going to use our own blog posts and stuff like that. And that's what's happening here.
I'm gonna put it on my phone.
It's on the internet, so you can put it on the phone
I
everywhere.
am.
You can send it to your
Right
friend.
now.
You can be like, "Hey, I made this." So did you get it up?
Yeah.
Actually, Tina, send me a text with it so I can see it too.
Sure. I'm so excited. All right.
Would you also send me my passport, please?
Oh yeah. Well, let me just finish this part real quick. Yeah. Yeah. Shoot me a text, Tina, and then
Okay.
I'm gonna put it on here so everyone can see.
Okay, all right, okay. All right, do it right now.
I know we're all busy and we all have day jobs and whatnot, but in between, really try and get this work in. I think I'm gonna cut the Saturdays and go longer on Mondays and Wednesdays, so that between Wednesday and Monday, that gives you Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's 4 days to, like, really absorb what we do. I'll just go a little bit longer on Monday and Wednesdays. I'm not going to do that right away because I already had those 4 events on Eventbrite. So I'll give it, like I said, the rest of February, or maybe even just 1 or 2 more weeks, depending on the turnout. But I think if that gives you more breathing room in between and you can get all the work in, that'll be a better experience for everyone.
Just said it.
All right, so let's see what Tina has.
I'm gonna sign in.
Tina's blog.
Yep, I'm done.
So this is the site that Tina just published. This is literally her code from her computer on the internet. And this, at some point down the road, probably in a couple months, I'll show you how to make this tinatwine.com. Like you can, it's your website.
Mhm.
You can do whatever you want with it. And it's your code, right? So you also have the code, which means as we do more and more of this, you will know how to change it so that you want to make it actually your website, right? Like right now, we just redeployed a template, but as we do more and more of this, you'll be able to like take the logo out, put in your own stuff, write your own blog posts. In fact, if you want to do that real quick right now, let me just show you how to do that, Tina. So just go here to your site, your site admin. And same as you, Kay, if you got it deployed.
Yeah.
And Nicole, how you holding up?
No, my hotspot is so slow.
Oh, it's too slow. Okay.
Okay, I'm here.
And then on the left side, you should see an option called configuration.
Mhm.
So click on that.
Okay.
And then click on CMS. And here is where your blog posts are maintained.
Okay.
Right? So click on the first one, collection of cozy whatever.
Mhm.
And you see title? Just change that to something else, like hello, I don't know, make offices or. Right, and then on the bottom, you'll see it says save, apply changes right there.
Mhm.
Just apply the change and tell me when you're done.
Okay. All right, post update. Okay.
And then if I go back to your site, I go home, work, hello world, right there,
Mhm.
right there.
Yep, that's it.
That's the one you just did.
Mhm.
That's it. So you can make whatever changes you want. And then you have access to the code, so you can do it at the code level as well.
Okay.
Okay, and that's
So this is basically acting as almost like the WordPress
That's what I'm saying. This
interface.
is like WordPress.
yeah. I created this
Mhm.
as a CMS, but instead of WordPress like PHP, it's Node Express.
Oh,
So it's not. This is a CMS just like WordPress,
Mhm.
but it's not using PHP, which is what WordPress uses.
Mhm.
It's using Node Express, and that's so I can teach Node Express. Like otherwise, I'd have to teach PHP, WordPress, and that doesn't pay well. Nobody wants to learn that. That's not going to get you where you want to go.
Right.
But this will. So that's why I built this platform.
So PHP is, I guess, like part of the things that I get confused all the time is what programs do what and what order things are called in, if that makes sense. Like, so whenever you first pull the web page, right, you're accessing an HTML file. That's
Yeah,
what the web browser
or in this case, a mustache file.
a mustache file.
In our case, because we're using the mustache templating engine.
But the browser, like, what is this, Chrome? Chrome
Yes.
reads it only inputs an HTML file?
No, it could read a lot of other stuff.
It can read
Yeah.
other stuff, okay. I know, and so then, because like, so I do a lot of back-end work
Mhm.
In the past, and so for some reason, the thing that we're working on now is using PHP to get the data for the front end, and it's terrible, and I'd like to switch it to JSON.
Yeah, PHP is terrible.
It's
Yeah.
like absolutely awful.
Right.
But basically, PHP does what JSON does. Like,
No. So PHP would be an alternative to it's a language.
Uh-huh.
PHP is a language, and the PHP templates you're using
Mhm.
would be an alternative to the mustache templating engine we're using.
Okay.
But because it's a language, you couldn't use like that within a Node Express project. They're incompatible. So you're basically all in on PHP if you're using PHP, what's called the LAMP stack.
Right, that's,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
And the reason why PHP is so popular and the LAMP stack is so popular is because WordPress uses it.
Mhm.
And WordPress basically does this where you don't have to know code to make changes, right? And so it became really popular over the past 15 years for that reason. But if you want to be a professional programmer, if you want to do what I do for a living, PHP will not get you there. So it's like the McDonald's of programming. Like, yeah, you can kind of eke out a living, but you're not going to be paid handsomely unless you're like the best PHP programmer in the world. You know, like you have to be that level good, right? And so when people want to learn programming, or at least in the context that I do programming, they're not typically referring to PHP. So that's the ecosystem there. So can you learn PHP and like become a programmer and earn a living? Yeah, people do that. It's a matter. It's like saying you can be a car salesman and sell used cars at $1,000 per, or you can sell high-end luxury vehicles to the richest people in the world. They're both car salesmen, right? They both sell cars, but which one do you want to be, right? And so that's kind of the way you want to look at that environment from a more market standpoint, from a like a business standpoint. So there's a reason I never picked up PHP. It was a business decision. It was an economical decision. There's a reason why I taught myself React and Redux. It was a business decision. It wasn't like, oh, this is cool, I want to learn this. No, not at all. I actually didn't enjoy that at all. Learning React and Redux was a miserable experience because I was teaching myself stuff I already knew in a different language that I could do very, very well. But I knew that language or that framework was on the way out, which is Angular 1. I knew that was on the way out. So this is like going back 4 years now, and I was like, well, in 4 years, I'm still going to be a programmer, right? Like, I'm not going to retire, right? Like, I have to be in this game somehow. And that's constantly going through my head. Every, I would say, 3 to 5 years, I have to reinvent myself.
So this being like at least in the context of, so I mean we're reading data output from the sensor.
Mm-hmm. It's probably like a SQL server or something like that.
Not quite. But I believe the way it's been written, and this is what I'm not sure of, is it outputs it as a like PHP post file.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure to what degree we can get in there and change how the sensor.
I'll see you on Wednesday. So I'll send you the password tonight. Okay.
Sensor output. Well, it's a router. So it's with like open RT. Anyway, but we have to make the interface now because we're in part network engineers, so all we have to do is hack it right.
Yeah.
And I've only ever like fake worked with front ends. Anyway, I'm not sure. Is this like outside the realm of like whatever?
Yeah, you're kind of stuck in a rock and a hard place. I mean, this is for your job, I assume, right? This is your job.
Yeah.
So, like, the job demands that you do something in PHP, right? And
Well,
I assume you don't have much control over that.
I'd rather like see if we cannot do it in PHP. Just
If you have a say, then I would recommend that. Yeah.
So like, is it possible to convert like PHP to?
No. Like once you're in PHP, so you're conflating PHP with the actual file the data format. It's not the same thing.
Okay.
It's like you could like parse JSON within a PHP project. It's not unusual. That can happen.
Mhm.
But like once you've chosen PHP, you don't want to think of it the way we're looking at Node, React, Node Express projects. Like the paradigms are very different. Unfortunately, at your job, you have to kind of comply with what they're doing. It's too bad it's PHP. It's one of the reasons why I left my last job. It's because they're doing a lot of like old school code from like outdated Java code from like 9 years ago. And I was like, look, like I don't want to keep doing. I'm deliberately getting obsolete in this position, and for that reason, I left. Like that was enough for me. And so I'm not suggesting you do that, not at all. But like these are the consideration. Like, you know, if I were in my current job, and one day they were like, hey, we need you to start building out this huge PHP stack for one of our bigger clients because that's what they demand, and this is a 24-month project. I'd be like, you can find someone else for that. Here's my 2 weeks, or you can literally quintuple my pay.
Right.
Pick one or the other. Like you can multiply my pay by 5, then I'll do it. If you multiply my pay by 3, I'll think about it. If you double it, I'm still out. Because I know that in 2 years, like if I'm doing like outdated work, then in 2 years I'm up a creek. Like when the company decides like we're cutting this whole division, and I'm back out in the market, and I'm like, hey, I know PHP length stack. It's like, well, okay, like here's an offer for 1/3 of what you make right now, and that's the market rate.
So what do you think is gonna, you keep talking about Angular, this is funny because my company, we work on an application, and they just, we're almost done with the legacy, application. We're still working out of it because we had too many users. And, we're redesigning a new one. But I'll say maybe 6 months ago, 5 months ago, they made all the developers learn Angular.
Angular, which one? That's a very important question. Angular 1 or Angular 8? Like that's the big distinction.
I want to say Angular 8.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay, all right, because even for what I do, we had to have Angular installed on our machine.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is Angular 8.
That's okay.
Okay.
I wouldn't have a problem with that. But if it was Angular 1, I'd be like, no. I'll multiply my pay by 5, and then I'll do it. But Angular, like anything over Angular 2 is a safe bet. You should be fine.
Okay.
So, Kia, good, bad, no?
Oh, no, it's good.
You got it
I was
working?
just playing around with the site.
Nice. All right. Can I see it? Send me a text message with the.
Okay.
Well, if you got it deployed, I want to show it to the world. I want to see it. So let's. Yeah, Nicole, it's a tough spot.
Yeah, well, the thing is, like,
Nicole or Nikki? What do you go?
I'm a chemist by training, and so I learned Fortran back in back in grad school.
Okay.
So like, Fortran 77, not even 95, so it was an object oriented.
Oh wow.
Because that's what our lab code was written in. And then just like from those fundamentals, I just like fake my way through about everything else. And I don't know how much to focus on what because it's not.
Well,
it's only a
the key
side.
question is what is your objective?
Yeah.
Where do you want to be in 6 months, 12 months, 24 months?
Yeah.
Those are the most important questions.
Yeah.
A lot of people are like, I just want to work on my own side for my own projects. Then do whatever you want to do. Like, there's no wrong answer there.
Right.
My perspective is almost entirely market-based. Like, I want to be competitive in the economy all the time. So with that in mind, these are the things I work on.
Right, which is like, I want to optimize what I get out of it, because I don't plan on staying at this company.
Mhm.
So I'd like to optimize what I can.
Yeah, everything I'm doing here,
Yeah.
I'm doing here is with that in mind.
Yeah.
That much I promise.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think any other way. Like, this is everything I'm doing here is with that in mind. So, a lot of these templates that I have you download, eventually they're going to have React code and Vue.js code and just more modern stuff, so that you're learning the things that the market demands right now. And especially in the DMV area, the market will demand a lot more in the next 5 to 10 years. Now is a great time to be in the DMV area for tech. And
Yes.
yep, let me just punch up your site now, Kia.
I was asking if it is.
Oh, easily. It's one of the reasons I moved down
Your
here.
experience.
So again, I'm a materials chemist by training, so this is all stuff that I just do.
And what by training?
Materials chemist by training, so this is not the place for materials chemistry. I will tell you that right now.
Okay. So now here is this Kia's version. You notice how the URL is different, but this is a real website. She published it, and she can change it and do the same thing that Tina did. And on Wednesday, we're going to go through this code some more and start tearing it up and making our own changes and putting in our own stuff. And you can use it as your own website if you want. And if not, we'll just do another one the following week, and then the next week, and then the next week.
So we have these one changed picture and a blog and
And real quick, Kia, while you still have it open, go to your admin page for your site,
Okay.
which should look like this.
Okay.
And click on configuration. Okay, and then click on CMS,
CMS.
right, that gray button. And on the left side, you should see the blog posts on your homepage, or at least the titles.
Why was this the hardest part for me? Like maneuvering in what apparently is just the.
Okay, and click on any one of those blog posts, doesn't really matter which one. And then just change the title. Whichever one you pick, change the title to like, hello, my name is Kia, or like, welcome to my blog, or whatever. And then on the bottom, it says apply changes. Click on that green button and tell me when that's done.
Let me go back because I changed logging my brain, but that wasn't the instruction.
Yeah, Nicole, in a given year, I work with like a dozen companies. I'm telling you, like, this is where it's at.
Yeah.
This is where the action is.
Right.
And
Which is where I want to be.
yeah.
Which isn't part like.
Part of my incentive, you know, it's not all altruism. You know, I'll find the sharpest developers, the best ones, and those are the people I refer to my client. You know, like that helps. So there's some of that going on too. But if that never happens, that's fine. Like I'm fine doing this. I don't hate this. This is fine.
Right.
But you know, if it does happen, that just helps me out in the DMV area. That's part of it. Okay, so that's why I'm like, let's get some work done. Kia?
I can't even get to the page.
All right, we'll do it on Wednesday. It's not, you gotta publish, that's the important thing. Okay, so I'm gonna, the same as usual, I'm gonna send the video out, the code. If you didn't get it deployed, work on that between now and Wednesday.
I finally figured out.
That's fine, I'm sure you'll figure it out. And then, what was I gonna say? We'll discuss either Wednesday or Saturday whether or not to switch over the schedule next week or the following week. If it's going to be mostly the same people, then we'll just make the switch sooner, and then you'll have 4 days to really go through the material. I think that would be a better way to run these. So, all right, sounds good.
Thank you.
Yep. See you Wednesday.